Good afternoon, everybody. It is a real joy to not really welcome back into the building of NSCI, but to welcome Rabbi Professor Dalia Marx back to NSCI to teach. She last taught here a bunch of years ago. When were you on sabbatical in Chicago? 7 years ago? 6 years ago, Dalia? And Dalia is a scholar and
Yeah, something like that.
I is a scholar and professor of liturgy at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Jerusalem. That is the alma mater of all of your NSCI clergy, though I'm old enough. I don't think any of us have well, you studied, probably Rabbi Jacob Leisman studied with you maybe in his year in Israel. But the rest of us are too old to have studied with Dalia, but I've gotten to study in more recent years. And I'm always learning from her, reading her texts, getting ideas, and I'm super excited because she has a brand new book out that inspired us to have this conversation today. It's called From Time to Time: Journeys in the Jewish Calendar, and speaks to the Jewish calendar and really interesting prayers, reflections, poetry. So I invited Dalia to speak as we approach Passover in a few years. And just a note that one of the powerful connections we share is that she is the Rabbi Aaron D. Pankin Professor of Liturgy and Midrash at HUC. And some of you have actually heard Rabbi Pankin of blessed memory, who spoke here at NSCI when I marked my 18th anniversary here. It's actually the last time I saw him before he was tragically killed in a plane crash. He's a dear friend and mentor. And so he spoke here on our Bima 7 years ago, sort of pretty powerfully. So we're linked in that as well. I'm going to turn the screen over to Dalia, who's got a PowerPoint and conversation, and we're super thrilled. She's been teaching HUC students all morning. She's here with us, and we're really grateful because it's now 8 p.m. by her. So thanks, welcome.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Green. It's very good to be with you today. I am especially happy to be with you because as you already heard, I was with you physically a few years ago, and now I'm especially happy to have contacts, any kind of contacts between Israeli communities and North American communities. I think this is a time in history that we have to really take care of each other. We're not in a great situation these days, and I don't think you are. So it's good to be together. And so thank you very much for this invitation. This is an unprecedented time, really out of the ordinary on so many levels, difficult, scary, but at the same time, we experience the routine events of the year cycle. And in a way, every time we celebrate a Chag, a festival, we have the historical time that we're in right now and the circular time sort of coincide and create a unique connection. And this is really what I try to do in this book that you already heard about from time to time, to mark the uniqueness of Jewish time in its different manifestations in different ethnic groups, East and West, and old and new, all denominations, and also and especially the female voice. The women voices is something that is very dear and very important to me. And as you know, women had rituals and prayers and supplications, but we don't often hear about them because most of them were oral. They were transmitted from grandmother to granddaughter, from mother to daughter, and they're not written. And I think this is one of the tasks of our generation to remember these voices. And today we're here to talk about Pesach, Chag HaChirut, the festival of freedom, festival of spring, the festivals of Matzot, the festival of liberation. And this time we are in a special challenge, celebrating the festival of freedom, when we know that so many people don't have freedom as we speak. So it is a challenge, and it has been the case since October 7th. It was a challenge to celebrate Hanukkah, which is a celebration of, among other things, heroism, and we didn't feel very empowered at that time. Or Purim, that's typically the most joyous celebration, and who had a who felt like being happy. But on the other hand, I think time, celebrations and festivals and holidays give us a unique opportunity to reflect, not only on the celebration, but also on our lives, on our relationship, on what is really dear to us, and how we experience the reality. So in a way, it's a litmus page, the way we celebrate Passover this year, to all the other things that we are experiencing. And I hope we will get to that as we move along. And I also think that celebration and marking time in a significant way, in a cognizant way, gives us some sort of control in situations that are chaotic and difficult. So every year Passover is special. Every year Passover is unique, but maybe this year it's more unique. What I try to do today, what I wanted to do today with you, and this is not a lecture, so anytime you want to ask something or add something, please just do so. We have a little bit less than an hour, and I think, no, Lisa, something like this. And so whenever you want to say something, please do. In the handouts that I sent you, you can see the two axes of how we relate to the Passover Haggadah. One of them is the historical axis, the evolution, the development of the Chag. And on page 2 and 3, you have the structure of the Haggadah. The structure of the Haggadah, it looks kind of chaotic, for a very simple reason, because it is chaotic, which is kind of funny. We call it the Seder night. Seder means order in Hebrew, but the Haggadah is far from being Seder oriented. It's very chaotic, and one of the reasons that it is, it doesn't look like, if I asked you to create a Passover Haggadah, I know that Rabbi Green created a Passover Haggadah, but you created a Haggadah based on, many Haggadot that we have today. If I asked you to create a ceremony, a ritual marking the liberation from the house of bondage, I don't think you would come out with something that is remotely resembles the Passover Haggadah. And as I said, the reason that it's so complicated and complex and maybe chaotic is because it was created throughout the generations over, I would say, more than 2,000 years. And what we thought about doing today is going over the development of the Passover Haggadah. And you have, if you want, the handouts that I gave you, and you can check how everything we say appears in the structure of the Haggadah. I marked the special simanim, kadesh, urchatz, karpas, yachatz, to help us to have some more order and orientation. That's basically the reason we have these simanim. And let me just upload the PowerPoint that I created for you today. So in every generation, the development of the Passover Haggadah, and if you see the image that I chose here is the red anemone. You will see in a second why I chose precisely this image. It's not a very typical Passover thing, but maybe this year it is. So when we think about the Passover Haggadah, I can think of distinct 8 stages. I'll say them really quick now, and then we will delve on each one of them a little bit longer. And if you have questions, of course, please ask. It will be a very quick journey. Sometimes I teach it in, I don't know, half a semester, and now we're going to do it with the very condensed time. But I think we kind of can get the idea of how the Haggadah is constructed. So the first period of the construction of what we have today is the first temple period, Beit Rishon, and then the second temple period, and then we have the Tanaitic period. The Tanaitic sages are those who composed the Mishnah, which is the first halachic compilation that we have. And then we have the Amoraic period. These are the sages of the Talmud. I know I'm saying it really, really fast. I will go back to each one of these periods in a second. Then we can talk about the Gaonic era. And the center shifts from the land of Israel to Babylon. And then Middle Ages that I divided into two parts. Middle Ages 1, 11th century to 15th or 16th century, and 11th and 15th, 16th century, all the way to the 18th century, or even the beginning of the 19th century. And then we can talk about modernity and post-modernity. That's 21st century. And number 9 is remains to be seen. And that's maybe what we will concentrate a little bit more. Okay, so if this is okay with you, I will just go over the different stages, the different phases of the development of the Haggadah. And if you want to mark in your handouts the different parts that we're talking about, when they appeared, you are more than welcome to do so. So in the first temple period, we actually do not have a lot of texts, so that we cannot really talk about anything that is related to Haggadah, to recitation, to reading of anything. What we have is the Torah requiring us to sacrifice the lamb, a sacrificial lamb, and we find it in Exodus chapter 12. As a vegetarian, this is not an easy part for me, but we really have no testimony of anything that was said during the sacrificial, the act of offering the lamb. It's interesting. So one scholar calls the first temple period the temple of silence. Yeah, the animals were offered and nobody spoke. Yeah, the Levites did not sing. It was completely silent. The first temple was built traditionally. This is what the Bible tells us, by King Solomon, and it was destroyed by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. That's the first phase. The second phase is the second temple period. And that's after the return of the exilers from Babylon to Jerusalem, to the land of Israel, until the destruction of the second temple in year 70 Common Era by the Romans. And here again, you have the poor sacrificial lamb. But now, unlike what we saw in the first temple period, and at least in the later part of the second temple period, we hear testimonies about things that people said. It was not only the act of offering, but it was prayers and recitations and hymns and songs that were recited in the context of the Paschal offering. We hear about it in Josephus. We hear about it in the compositions of Philo, Second Temple period, and also in the New Testament, which I prefer to call the Christian Bible, because for me there is one testament. And we just need to remember that Jesus was a Jew. Jesus lived as a Jew, and he celebrated Pesach as a Jew. If you told him that he's Christian, he wouldn't know what you're talking about. I'm sure I'm saying things that are known to everybody here, but some of the testimonies that we find in the Christian Bible are valuable to us because they show us how Jews actually celebrated their tradition, how they read from how they worshipped, how they read from the prophets, how they offered the Paschal lamb, etc. So that's the second temple period. Right after the destruction of the temple, when the actual worship, the actual service of Pesach was no longer possible, and it is no longer possible until our days, right? I would say thank God for that. Some people in Jerusalem would like to see the rebuild of the temple and the reinstitution of the sacrificial cult and the sacrificial service. And some of them really mean it seriously, you know, so it's, I would say very dangerous, but but nevertheless, this is not something that is operative today. Yeah, so this is the disappearance or the disenabling. Did I make up a word now? I don't know. Is it a word in English? Disenabling? But now there's not a possibility to offer the lamb. Now there's got to be substitutions for the act of offering. So instead of doing it, we talk about things. And it's interesting and important that already in the last period of the Second Temple period, we hear about recitations and prayers and songs and hymns. One scholar, Jacob Neusner, said that the greatest fortune of the temple was that it was destroyed, because toward the end of the era of the Second Temple, people kind of looked for a different kind of spirituality. The offering of animals did not seem enough for them. They wanted something else, more intellectual, more and since the temple was destroyed in such a traumatic event, it sort of engraved it in the Jewish memory, and it entered the traditional liturgy, etc. But otherwise, it would have been just dissolving and being forgotten by a lot of people. Okay, this is the second period we're talking about. I'm moving to the third. If it's okay, stop me whenever if you have any questions or something is not clear. Now we're talking about the Tanaitic period. As I said, the Tanaites are the sages of the Mishnah. The Mishnah, the 6 orders of the Mishnah, is the first compilation of Jewish law, at least as we know it. First systematic order of this whole literature. I say literature, but it was oral at the beginning. And we see what we can call the emergence or the appearance of the Seder. And it is talked about in tractate Psachim. Psachim is Pesach in plural, in the Mishnah. Interestingly enough, tractate Psachim has 10 chapters, most of which are not operative in the days of the Mishnah. Yeah, they are not operative anymore because they deal with the offerings, with the sacrifices, how you do it, what deems kosher, what doesn't deem kosher, when exactly you have to do it, who does it, etc. So 9 chapters deals with things that many of them are not operative in the Tanaitic period, and only the last chapter deals with what you do now. Yeah, so even this chapter is sort of mixed. Some of it seems that its initial reduction was in the time of the temple, but most of it represent a post-destruction era. So we hear for the first time about the 4 cups. In the documents I sent you, I put a little icon of cup whenever we drink one of the cups. So we hear about 4 cups already in the Mishnah, already in the 3rd century. We have Manishtana. The Manishtana, what is different, how it is different, what we call the 4 questions. Actually, this is one question with 4 answers. In the Mishnah, it has a slightly different text, but then we will leave it for another session. And then my father was a wandering Aramean, Arami Oved David. This is also mentioned in the Mishnah. And the recitation of the Hallel, the 6 psalms, the 6 joyous and celebratory and festive psalms that we recite in every festival and also in Rosh Chodesh. They appear here in the Seder already in the Mishnah time. And then we also hear about special food items. So the idea is that you eat certain things. Some of them are not the normal food items you would eat every night, and then you discuss them, you talk about them. And then we have a discussion, that's the Magid, that's the part of the reading of the bulk of the Haggadah, the body of the Haggadah. And then you have the most coveted part of the Haggadah, at least in my family, and that's Shulchan Aruch, where we start eating. So already these items appear in the 3rd century, but they appear in a very different form and way than we have today. We also have, that's not in the Mishnah, but that's in another text from this era, in the Mechilta. We have the story about the 4 children, Midrash Arbaat Abanim, that's already in that time. There is a difference there. It talks about a tipesh, a stupid son, not a tam, not a simple son. Okay, this is just for you to see how a manuscript of the Mishnah looks like. That's the Kaufman manuscript of the Mishnah. Kaufman manuscripts is a beautiful, look at the beautiful handwriting that you have here. It's from the 10th or 11th century. So you can see it's like 700 years after the creation of the Mishnah. But that's one of the oldest texts that we have, especially since we have the entire Mishnah with this manuscript. So it's 700 years. It's like today we will see something from the, I don't know, 14th century, and we will think that the way it is written now represent the past. So we don't really know, we don't have a way to know what the Tannaitic sages actually said, because the transmission was oral. But we have a good reason to believe that what we have in front of us resembles what the sages did. And what you have here is מה נשתנה הלילה הזה, what is different this night, which is different text than the one it slightly differs from the text that we have today. I'm moving to the next period, if it's okay. That's the Amoraic period. The Amoraic period, and now we are talking about the sages of the Talmud. They are called Amoraim. The Talmud is a compilation based on the Mishnah that we just discussed. So the Talmud can be understood as a commentary on the Mishnah, explanation, elaboration, expansion of what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is the text itself is not very difficult. It's a very straightforward Hebrew, but it's kind of cryptic because it's an elliptic. It's not always clear what the Mishnah is referring to, and it's also not very clear to the Amoraic sages, and this is what they try to figure out, what the Mishnah is really trying to say. The Amoraim's greatest contribution is, as I said, the Talmudim, the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, which is when you just say Talmud, you mean the Babylonian Talmud, because that's the text that is learned and produced throughout the ages in the Jewish culture more than any other text. But then you also have the Palestinian Talmud that was created in the land of Israel. It is called Yerushalmi. Although it was not created in Yerushalayim, it was created in the Galilee. But maybe to ascribe it with great authority, they called it Yerushalmi. So what do we have? What are the special innovations or additions that the Amoraim sages added to the Mishnah, to the Haggadah as we have it today? Their greatest contribution is what we call the Magid. Magid, Magid, rochza, motzi, matzah, right? So Magid is, the word Magid comes from lehagid, to say or to recite or to read out loud. And that's what they brought into the Haggadah. We have a beautiful description of a certain Seder that was created, that was performed in the probably the early Amoraic period, and it's like rare recordings. And the idea is that you have to talk about the redemption from Egypt. That's what you need to do. And what we have in the Talmud is an example of how it was done in a certain year. But the way it is used in Jewish tradition is that you take the text from the Talmud and you bring it into the Passover Haggadah, and then you have to read what these people learned. So basically, that's, I would say, I don't want to say defeat the purpose, because it doesn't defeat the purpose. This is a wonderful and interesting text, but the idea is for you to discuss, what does it really mean? What does it mean to be a slave? What does it mean to be in a house of bondage? What does it mean to be liberated? What does it mean to be delivered, redeemed, right? So that's what the Amoraim added to the Haggadah as we have it today. Yeah, the retelling of the story of the salvation from Egypt. And it has several parts. You also have it in your handouts. Avadim Ainu, we were slaves, etc. The next period And now, as I said, I think before.
Dalia, hang on one sec. Can I just give a frame of reference, folks? So the Magid is where you have, I mean, you're getting into the storytelling. So you're getting into four questions, you're getting into four children and different pieces depending on what Haggadah you use. So that's stuff that whether it's familiar with the name Magid, everyone, it's definitely familiar in terms of the pieces of the story. And we get into lots of stuff with the symbols beyond the Kiddush cup in terms of interpreting them vis-a-vis the story. And back to you.
Great. No, absolutely. But this is really the bulk of the Haggadah, as you say. That's really the bulk of the Haggadah as we have it. That's what we're supposed to be doing on Passover night, to tell the story. And as Rabbi Green was saying, this part is comprised of different parts. Some of them were already created in previous times, in the Mishnah, right? Because we saw that in the Mishnah, we already have the four cups and Manishtana and four children, etc. But the way it is organized is in the Amoraic period. I moved to the Gaonic period. Gaon is not as we use it in modern Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, Gaon is genius, but in classical understanding, Gaon is the head of a yeshiva, the head of a house of study. Especially in Babylon, the center of attention shifts from the land of Israel, from Palestine to Babylon. The land of Israel was under the Muslim occupation and then under the Crusades and the Christian occupation. So it was not the Jewish center there suffered a lot and shrinked, and eventually it almost disappeared. But in Babylon, they really thrived and created beautiful Torah, beautiful learning. So in that period, which spreads from the 7th century to the 11th century, toward the end of this period, we see the emergence of the first Passover Haggadahs. This is the first time we see the actual text of the Passover Haggadah. Obviously, that was a very expensive thing. It was a manuscript. Not everyone could have Haggadah, let alone not everyone around the table. You would have a Haggadah only if you were extremely wealthy. Most people had to recite the Haggadah by heart. And I just want to remind you that Passover is different from other Chagim in the sense that it is celebrated mostly in the home, right? Unlike, I don't know, high holidays, the Day of Atonement, Rosh Hashanah. Even if you don't know a lot, you go to the synagogue and the rabbi and the cantor and the clergy and people who know what they're doing will lead it for you. That's not the case with Pesach. That's why a lot of people are so nervous before Pesach. I'm nervous because of the cooking, but that's a different thing. So a lot of people are nervous because everyone is in a way a rabbi or a leader or a clergy in their own home. That's why you need a text, right? We need a text. What do we do? What comes first? What comes last? What's the order? Do I really need to memorize everything by heart? So this is in this period, the 9th century, 10th century, and onwards, we have manuscripts written by hand of the text of the Haggadah. Another addition that you have in that area is the text Ha Lachma Anya. This is the bread of affliction, and some people think that Ha Lachma Anya, in a way, represents the whole concept of what we do in Passover, because Ha Lachma Anya is, if I say Ha Lachma Anya, is the text known to everyone? Ha Lachma Anya. Anyway.
I think so. I mean, we hold up the matzah and we say, this is the bread of affliction. Then the line four
It
most
talks about
powerful.
past, present, and future. Yeah.
Go ahead. We just cut out a little bit technologically. You're great.
Okay. But you were saying, or you? You were saying something, Lisa?
I think the perhaps the most famous line for everyone on the Zoom in Halach Ma'anya is when we say this is the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate in Egypt, and then we say, let all who are hungry come and eat," which is a familiar line, whether you read it in English or Aramaic or probably English. Let all who are in need come and celebrate the Passover with us. So one of the key values of Passover. Good. Back to you, Dalia.
Exactly. So these are the two of the maybe the most important values of Pesach. We remember the bread of affliction of our ancestors. We invite everyone who's hungry. And the last line in the traditional Haggadah is, "This year we are here. Next year, may we be in the land of Israel." Right? This year we are still in a situation of being slaves in a way. Next year, may we be free people. So it's past, present, future. And some scholars believe, like Avigdor Shenani believes, that this is the core of the Haggadah. That if you don't have the whole text and you don't have the energy, or you don't have the knowledge to do the whole thing, you can just say Halach Ma'anya, and it represents, as Rabbi Green said, the key values of the Haggadah: past, present, and future. Past is, this is the bread of affliction. Present, here we are sitting around the table. If you are hungry, come and join us. And the future is, may we be delivered next year. And we also have Dayenu in that time. This is enough. Dayenu, right? Even if we only got this from you, God, that would be sufficient, right? This would be enough if we only had that from you. And we have the story of the sages in Bnei Brak. Now we move to in legal Jewish language, it's called the Rishonim, the early ones of the yes, and here we have not so much many innovations of the text of the Haggadah, but we have a lot of commentaries and a lot of graphic designs, artistic designs that are in a way midrashim of the texts of the Haggadah. So we have, in terms of text, we have the addition of Shpoch Hamatcha, pour your wrath. We call God to take revenge on those who harm us, those who hurt us. This text was added in the time of the Crusades. And Passover, I want to remind you, was a very sensitive time for the Jews in Europe, because this is around Easter, and this is where the priests would come with very anti-Jewish statements about the Jews who killed Jesus, supposedly, etc. So the Jews had to sort of defend themselves. And what is the mechanism of defending yourself if you're disempowered and powerless? You can say nasty things, right? You could not really defend yourself physically. So this is one of these texts. I think in many, am I right, Rabbi Green? In many of our progressive Haggadot, we don't find this text, or we find...
Yeah, it's out. It's been out for a lot of years. Yeah.
Right. We don't have that because it's really... it's hate talk, right? Which I can understand when you talk about the Jews in medieval Germany, right? But I don't know if I can justify it for our days, even if we are in a really bad situation right now. So we have the concluding piyutim, the nirtza. We have echad mi yodea, the numeric piyut. What is one? One is our God. What is two? Two is the table of Luchot HaBrit, how do you say Luchot HaBrit?
The commandment, the tablets of the commandments.
The tablets of the commandments, our parents, our father, for our mothers, etc. So this is one. We have Chad Gadia. So all the songs that you have in the end are either game songs to keep the children awake, or songs and poems that have to do with redemption and hopes for a messianic age. And this is the time where you see a lot of manuscripts throughout the Jewish world, and in them you see visual midrashim. We will see a few examples in a second. So the text of the Haggadah is relatively consolidated at this time, I would say. but what is different is the commentaries and the artistic aspects of the Haggadah. Yeah, so the text is basically solid, but how you want to present it, that changes from Haggadah to Haggadah. So let us see a few examples. This is the bird heads Haggadah that you can find in the Israel Museum here in Jerusalem. And you can see the Jews with their pointed heads. The Jews were forced to wear these hats so that they can be identified. And you can see here people really preparing the matzah on the left side. And here you have this pointed fork to make the little holes in the matzah so it doesn't rise and it stays flat. And you have the woman preparing the dough. Why do we have bird heads? That's a question that a lot of people ask. We're not really sure. Some people believe that it's because of the commandment not to draw tselem, not to draw image of real people. And some people thought that it was a non-Jewish artist who wanted to mock the Jews. Who knows? There are several theories, right? So that's one example. The second example, that was that's the Sarajevo Haggadah. There's actually a book about this Haggadah. I forgot the name of it. An American writer wrote a novel about what happened to this Haggadah because it was passed from here to there. It is now in Sarajevo, but it's actually a Sephardic Haggadah that was created in Barcelona in the 14th century, and it's really beautiful, beautiful art. And you can see here the story of the creation of the world. You can ask, what is the connection between the story of the creation of the world and Passover? But think about it. If a person had a book in their home, you cannot own many books unless you are extremely wealthy. If you own a book, then this book should contain everything you want to say, everything that is really important. So you contain the story of creation. Do you remember, Lisa, the name of the novel about?
Yes, it's by Geraldine Brooks and it's called People of the Book, and it's one of my favorite novels of all time. It's like a mystery about finding this novel, everyone. It's great.
Right.
Dalia, do you want to go a little more than stop for questions and reflections from folks, or really questions, I guess, to you for reflection?
Sure, or we can stop now if you want. Or do you want
Sure,
to
you
see a
wanna-
word or two Haggadot and we can?
Yeah, let's show a few more, and then where it's a natural break for you, I just want to give people the time to ask
Sure.
questions to you, of you.
Sure, of course. So you know what, the next thing that I want to show is the time of the what I call Middle Ages too. That's early modernity, and that's the beginning of the printing press and how the printing press impacted Jewish literacy in general and the Haggadah in particular. But maybe if we want to pause here for
Sure.
remarks or questions.
Questions of Dalia, a lot of amazing history, information, and structuring of, as you put it, Dalia, a book that seemingly is organized, but maybe not. Also, Dalia, I want to just name what you know, and I know, and many people may know, but that the Haggadah, one of the things it shows us is that the Haggadah is written and crafted over time, which is so important. Which I know may be obvious, but it's important to say it, because when we take the commandment of seeing ourselves as if we left Egypt and we try to bring our own times and experiences, as I started this conversation with, we see that that's been done over time. I'm going to stop talking. Questions? Anyone? Okay.
Right. So absolutely. No, sorry.
No, go ahead. Janie, you have a quick question? Go ahead.
You're muted.
You're muted.
You need to open your mic.
Unmute. Okay. I just want to comment that with all the years I've used the Haggadah, I did not know about it being written in this framework and that there were names to these different parts. So I just find this very educational and interesting. It gives a different meaning to the Haggadah to me.
Thanks. Yeah, it's
Thank you very
powerful.
much. So what I try to do, and exactly what you say is the details are not so important. What I try to show is two things. First of all, the structure of the Haggadah, that's page 2 and 3 in your handouts, that is not intuitive at all, I think, to my mind. And it's not intuitive because it was created throughout so many generations, and each generation, as Rabbi Green was saying, added what they felt was needed for them. So in times of persecution, you talk about Messianic age. In times of hate and fear, you talk about revenge. So that's building like an archaeology. The image that I have in my mind is of archaeological.
Patel?
What's the word?
Patel, the mount?
Oh, we say it in Hebrew, right?
Yeah.
Archaeological. Thanks, new word. So one layer on top of the other, and the further you get, does not cancel what happened before. It just builds upon it, and that's exactly how the Haggadah is constructed.
I think the word is scaffolding. Is that the word you're looking for?
It's not really a scaffold. I mean, so if you've been in Israel and you've seen a tel, which is a mound that has like layers of Jewish history. So scaffolding is a supporting structure, and there is some of that in the Haggadah, Jane. But the idea that the Haggadah has been built upon layer upon layer, essentially, right? There's the Mishnaic earliest text, which even goes back to the Paschal offering, and then over time, like, it gets built. For example, Elijah enters the Haggadah after the Crusades?
Yeah.
Rabbi Marx?
Yeah. That's part of this pour your wrath. You open the door to welcome Elijah, but actually you open the door to make sure nobody's standing behind the door, right? So nobody's listening to what we're going to say. And what are we going to say? We're going to say, pour your wrath. And then you have as you said, the invitation of Elijah and the Elijah cup. Absolutely, yes. So we see that it's a very multivocal and multi-layered text that at a certain point, with the printing press, stopped evolving in the way we normally saw until now. The text kind of froze, and now the great creativity is in the artistic aspect and in the commentary. So you have philosophical commentaries, and you have midrashi commentaries, and you have mystical commentaries, and Kabbalah related commentaries, all kinds of commentaries or philological commentaries. Each commentary kind of takes the Haggadah to a different direction, but the text at that era is kind of consolidated a little bit. Okay, I'm putting it back, but stop me whenever, okay?
This is fabulous. Thank you.
Someone was saying something? Okay, so I'm moving now to the early prints. Jews, as you know, were one of the people who enjoyed greatly the invention of the printing press. Now we know that it was invented before in China, but Jews were not exposed to that. So we see the early prints, the Jews made great use of the printing press. And the printing press has two effects. One of them we just mentioned now. It consolidates the text. It makes the text less vibrant and less open to influences. But the other influence, the other aspect of the press, of the printing press, is that it's relatively easy and relatively cheap to produce many texts. So now you don't need to spend 2 months to copy the text of the Haggadah so that you will have your own Haggadah. Now you can just buy it for a reasonable price. And the picture that I brought you here is from the Copenhagen Haggadah. You see one of the Israelites in the wilderness finding the manna in the desert. Yes, of course, the Israelites were dressed exactly like that. That really makes sense.
And the manna looks like matzah.
Right, and the manna looks like matzah, exactly. And this is the 4 children from the Prague Haggadah. This is one of the first Haggadah that were printed in 1526. Very interesting. One of the most, maybe next year we'll talk about the 4 children. That's really very creative aspect of the Haggadah. Because what you have to say about life, about education, about values, about what really counts in your community, you do it through, you can do it very easily through the 4 children story. So you can see here the wise child is a sage, right? He's dressed in a very traditional garment. Who is the wicked one? It's the soldier, right? It's interesting. In many Zionist Haggadahs, the wise child is a soldier. And sometimes the naive child or the simple child is dressed as an ultra-Orthodox. So it's, the values of a keilah, of a community, are often manifested and reflected by and through the 4 children. Now we move to modernity and postmodernity. And here we see, I think you can say, I created Haggadah, therefore I am. Everyone is creating Haggadah. Everyone, every political group and the youth movement and organizations and religious movements, everyone create their Haggadah. Sometimes the text is the traditional text and only the visual aspect is new. And sometimes, like in our movement, in the Reform movement, you see that the text itself is changed. And you see additions relating to recent historical events. I'll show you some examples in a second. And attention to questions of ideological issues, such as gender and inclusivity. So this is one of the kibbutz Haggadah. There are hundreds of kibbutz Haggadahs in Israel, really beautiful. For many years, each kibbutz has its own Haggadah, and every year they created a new Haggadah. And there are some Haggadot that served a few kibbutzim. This is the Haggadah of the kibbutz Arti, that is to say the most left-wing aspects of the most left-wing movement of the kibbutz movement in Israel. And they also had an Haggadah. They don't have God in their Haggadah. God is not invited to the Seder, but they have very beautiful rituals and ceremonies in the Haggadah, celebrating the spring, celebrating the love of the land, celebrating freedom, etc. And this is another kibbutz Haggadah. If this is from 58, this is a bit older. 1949, just after the establishment of the State of Israel. And this is a text that was, you can see that it was really hand typed for Bnei Akiva, the Orthodox youth movement. And you can see the text is not part of the traditional Haggadah, it's addition, talking about how in every generation we are persecuted. So you see 1492, that's the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, and then 1933, that's of course the rise of the Nazi party to Germany, and then 1940, and how every generation we deal with enemies. So you can see that it was really hand print and hand painted. And this is probably, I cannot say for sure, but probably the first feminist Haggadah. It was printed in the Ms. magazine in 1972, and since then, many dozens of women Haggadah, feminist Haggadah, gender-related Haggadah, very, very creative aspects of the Haggadot. Well, I'm not in a historical order here. This is a displaced person camp Haggadah in München. The text is completely traditional. They didn't add anything as far as I remember, but you can see the art, yeah? Here you don't have Pharaoh, you have a SS officer abusing the Jews here, yeah? And you see the camp, picture from the camps. And this is the Union Haggadah. I think many of you probably know it. And you can see different images from different Haggadot in this very famous and very popular Haggadah by many, the Union Haggadah 1923. Now there's a new Haggadah by the American Reform Movement, the CCR, but this is the, I don't know, I think the classical. Lisa, you probably know it.
It was the classic for much of the 20th century that other Haggadot were based off of. One thing for you all to know is kind of interesting is there are some key theological changes in this. I mean, in all these Haggadot that Dalia points out, this one I think doesn't have the plagues in it, as I recall.
Oh, all
Yeah.
right.
Sort of
And
fascinating.
And as you mentioned before, you don't have pour your wrath or anything that has to do with revenge, right?
You have Elijah, but the pour out your wrath is it's back in the newer ones, but not in the older ones.
Mm. And this is the vegetarian Haggadah, the Haggadah of the liberated lamb, Asher Meshuchrar. And yeah, so this is just a few examples of new Haggadot. Really, many. I think there are. This is allegedly the most printed Jewish book ever, right? Because everyone has their own Haggadah. As we said before, I have an Haggadah, therefore I am. And this is once again the different phases that we went over in a very, very quick manner. I hope not too quick. But there is number 9. And what is number 9, right? If we said that we ended in modernity and post-modernity, I think 4 years ago we marked a special Passover, if you remember, right? I think in the United States too, in Israel, we were not allowed to celebrate together. It was really the high time of COVID, so people were at home. So I would say that's the pandemic in 2020 and also 2021. And of course, a lot of people said, how is this night different? Yeah, how can we make this night festive and celebratory and meaningful, even if we cannot celebrate it the way we used to, right? So in a way, crisis is a catalyst for change. And I think in many communities, not necessarily regarding Pesach, but the way we do things is changed since then. And take, for example, what we do right now. I know we used to have sometimes classes on Skype and these kind of things, but being able to study together, to pray together, to be together via screens like we have now is something that is kind of new. And the pandemic forced us to rethink, what does it mean to be a family? What does it mean to be a community? What does it mean to be together? It forced us to change. So sometimes a crisis or catastrophic time or challenging time make us reconsider things and do things differently. And I would end here. I mean, I would end here, but then this year forced us to rethink everything again. Yeah, with this year forced us to rethink again about everything. How we celebrate, what does it mean to be a Jew, how we do things, how can we celebrate the celebration of freedom and liberation when this is something that a lot of people are deprived from. And that goes back to the anemones. Am I pronouncing it right? Anemones, the kalaniot, this flower.
Anemones. It's a hard word in English for a native English speaker. It's okay.
So this flower that you saw at the beginning, I chose it as the image for the opening slide that I shared with you. These flowers represent the south in Israel. It is often called Darom Adom, the red south. And when they talked about red south, they talked about these beautiful flowers, the anemones. And every year there are trips and people go and look at this beautiful flowering of this flower in the south. This year, obviously, when you think about Darom Adom, red south, you think about, unfortunately, very, very different things. So this is why I brought it here. And I think the situation that we are in right now force us to, again, to rethink and to reconsider. Oh, no, that's not what I want. To rethink and to reconsider, what does it mean? Yeah. And to ask how this night is different. How shall we celebrate the Pesach like we always celebrated the Pesach? But do we want to give this year a special acknowledgement that we are talking about something else, that something else is happening? And as we said at the beginning, ritual can be a coping device, a coping mechanism with trauma or with a abnormal situation like we have now. So maybe that's also something that we can think of or consider this year. And there are many suggestions, maybe you have a few, how this year can be marked differently during Pesach. How we can use the symbolic aspects of Pesach to mark what happens now and our special hopes and yearnings that we have this year. If you have any ideas, I'm happy to hear.
I'd be curious if people have things they've thought about, to Dalia's question about the things that you might bring to your Seder. One conversation that's been buzzing around the clergy team here at NSCI, and Dalia, I don't know what you've heard in your realms, is like what symbol might we add to the plate, right? I mean, so many of you have added the orange, for example, and sometimes people have added a potato peel as we think about those who survived the Holocaust. But any thoughts on a symbol you might add, or a reading, or a question you might bring to your Seder? Now, I was thinking about the olive, which has been brought up at different times in terms of peace and olive branch, but there's it also becomes somewhat loaded, maybe, I don't know, but
Yeah.
somebody suggested a fig, that we should like sit under our vines and fig trees.
Beautiful.
Peace. I thought, hi, Charlie.
I think we also need, my feeling is that we need to give place to the sorrow. Let's put it
Yeah.
this way. I hope that by Pesach, all of them will come back home. The war will be over. The soldiers will be home. The refugees will be relocated at their homes, and everything we can talk about all of this in past tense. But even then,
Sure.
so some people suggested drinking salty water, representing the tears. Some people proposed to add another child to the 4 children, a child who cannot be with us right now. And what I already know that is done in many synagogues every Shabbat is to leave a chair and to put a plate and everything, and to leave a chair to the person who's not with us right now. And we are hoping that they will come back soon. So there are many ideas and many thoughts. Who knows what will stay? Some of these ideas may catch and become standards, and some of them may be forgotten.
Well, I go to services in 2 congregations out here in Arizona. The large Reformed Temple with, of course, Lisa's colleague, Sarah Mason Barkin, and also to an Orthodox shul where my son goes because he is Baal Teshuva Orthodox. And at both temple and shul, we say that paragraph from the traditional Sidur, Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael, which is in the Torah service, which most of us as Reformed Jews never learned. But it's in the Torah service every time they read Torah. And we do it at the Friday night services at the temple and every Shabbos morning at the shul, the same exact words. So for me, I'm thinking about Yetziat Mitzrayim and the whole idea of getting our people free. There's just almost every page of the Haggadah is going to lead to some discussion about the Matzav in Israel.
Right.
Dalia, הכרתי אותך בכנס בשיקגו לפני כמה שנים. I was the introducer to the program at the CCAR conference when you spoke in Chicago some years ago. So it's nice to see you again, and I wanted to join this program today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. תודה רבה. The text that Charles is talking about, when you were talking, I was trying to find it really quickly, is Achenu bet kol bet Israel, our brothers and sisters, the whole house of Israel, who are in captivity and in distress. May the Holy One save them. As you say, this is part of the traditional weekday Torah service. I'm the editor of the Israeli Reform Siddur. I'm the chief editor. And the minute after October 7th, I start get this frantic phone call. Can it be, from my colleagues, can it be that we did not include it in our Siddur? Yes, we did not include it in our Siddur because it was really under the radar. It's the fact that so many peoples will be taken in captivities by enemies from our country. And I'm not talking about soldiers, I'm talking about civilians, women, children, elderly people. This was something that was completely beyond our set of thinking. So obviously I took right away, I took stickers with the text and we glued them on all the Sidurim at HUC where I teach, but also we send them to all the rabbis and people put them in the Sidurim. So thank you very much. I think this is a beautiful example of including a traditional text that was not initially meant for the Passover Haggadah, but it can be useful maybe for that. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
If anyone wants it, Deborah, go ahead.
So what I've been thinking about this for about a week now. And I was remembering that when I was 10, 11, 12, whatever, in that age frame, there was trouble getting Jews out of Russia. And we added a paragraph to the Matzah of Hope thing, having to do with getting the Russian Jews out of Russia. And I was hoping that I could find something similar for freeing the hostages in Israel. And if not, I will try to write something. I thought that would be an appropriate place to put that.
I think the example you give is actually very, very beautiful and very much in place, because you see that catastrophes or situations that are very troubling found their way into the liturgy, at least in the liberal world, to address these things. Yes, and now I remember it. We used to say it in the grace after meal. What you say now about the Soviet Jews, etc. We took it out because we felt that there's no need for it anymore, and now there is a need for it. So absolutely right. Yeah, maybe you will write something beautiful for that.
Deborah, I'm still looking. I'm going through some Haggadah supplements. So if you find something, please share, and I will do the same with all of you.
Thank you.
Sherry, Charlie, Roz, Janie, here we go.
Here's the
Oh.
text Charles was talking about. Our brothers and sisters, the entire house of Israel who are in trouble and captivity, whether at sea or on dry land, may the Makom, the Holy One, the God, have mercy on them and bring them out of trouble to salvation, from darkness to light, and from captivity to redemption, now swiftly and in our time. And let us say amen. And I don't know, Charles, if you read it, if you recite it, or if you sing it, because there's a very beautiful melody by A.B. Rothenberg, the cantor Rabbi.
My grandchildren go to Orthodox day school and they sing it every day, particularly on Torah reading days. But no, we just read it, but it's very important. Thank you for sharing today.
Yes.
Dalia, could you possibly send me the PDF of that, or
Yeah,
I
I
will
was
share
gonna-
it with everyone.
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
be great.
Yeah, I would like
Yes.
that.
Of
And I'll
course.
share it with everyone. I have it in a much less pretty form. Janie, you have a question?
I actually have a comment in that when we lived outside of Asheville, the first year we moved there, I guess it was like around 2007, the rabbi at the Reform Synagogue invited us to his home for the Seder. And it was very interesting. He had a coffee table covered with one of each kind of a Seder. Each one was different, from a graphic novel to one that was a feminist one. And he asked each person to choose one that they'd like to use for the Seder.
Nice.
And we followed it and I remember feeling very confused trying to to follow it. But when anyone read, they held up their Seder their Haggadah, I'm sorry, to show what that Haggadah looked like. It was just a very unusual and meaningful experience. And then he talked a little bit about where he had gotten each of the Haggadahs from in his collection.
Right. Lisa, did you want to say something?
No, I wanted to just give people the chance to ask questions and tell you that next week I'll send the info to you all. I'm doing a Zoom session. I'm just really thinking interactively, like Dalia, Rabbi Marx's presentation, I hope gets you thinking. And then I'll pull together some sources from different places and we'll have a Zoom conversation for thinking about how to get folks of all ages involved at your Seder. So I hope you guys will join me for that. Other last questions? This has been amazing.
Yes.
You know my love of Haggadot and Pesach, and I learned so much more. And I encourage you all to feel empowered. I mean, part of having this conversation today was to think about the Seder, which we've got a few weeks for it, and like what you want to bring to the table, and literally.
Right. It's always such a beautiful and creative opportunity to bring to our tables, as you say, the tradition. It's in its manifold appearance, but also our needs and our feelings, where we are this year and how we celebrate this year. And maybe freedom is not only a celebration, but it's a requirement. It requires of us to think about freedom. It requires us to think about our freedom, the freedom of other people, what we have to do to make sure people are free. And yes, so thank you very much, and all the best to all of you.
Thank you all. If
Thank
you
you.
have thoughts or questions that come up after the fact, I'm happy to connect you with Rabbi Marx. And Di, thanks for sharing your time after the end of a long teaching day and in between teaching and protesting. If you've all seen
Thank you.
the
It's a
headlines
pleasure.
and photographs.
It's
May
better to be
we
with you than dealing with the Israeli police these days. I'll tell you
Sure.
that.
And I hope to see you all. I'll send you the information about Monday's session about how each of us can lead an interactive Seder, but that will be sort of hands-on and sharing of information, and Talia got me inspired, so I'm grateful for that. Thanks, I'll have a great day. Go get some dinner, whatever that is, and good to see you all and hear your voices. Thanks. Toda rabba.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Toda rabba.
Da.